Hey, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If it's your first time here, welcome. This channel is all about sewing and fashion. If you'd love to learn to sew at the comfort of your homes, make sure to hit on the subscribe button, turn on your post notifications to be the first to get notified whenever there's a new tutorial. Today's tutorial is on this beautiful princess dart short dress with fluffy ruffles. I wanted to make this short dress, but I didn't want the regular ruffles. I wanted something that would add more vibrance to my dress, and I created these fluffy ruffles you see here. And this looked so beautiful. I love the fact that it didn't take the shine of the actual dress, it just magnified it beautifully. And the bounce effect, oh my god, I love it so much. It is just magical. That's too much talk already. If you'd love to learn how I went about this, stick with me to the end of this tutorial and let's get started. I've already gone ahead to put my fabric on fold here. I have the front and the back, and the front I place it exactly at the zipper allowance of the back, as you can see here. I'll just be using a pin to secure this in place. Now for the zipper allowance, I use 1.5 inch and I ruled a straight line across, then place my front from that point. Make sure that what you have here is going to be enough to contain the drafting of your bodice. Just divide your bust measurements by 4, add about 2.5 inches to that for your dart and for your stitching allowance. Multiply that by 2, cut it and put it on fold. The first thing I'll be doing is to come down from the top of this point here by 1/2 inch to get my starting line. I'm going to mark this on both sides and I'm going to connect with a straight line. Please pardon me, this fabric can move around a lot, but that won't be a problem because you'll be seeing everything I'm doing. This starting line is going to also serve as the shoulder line from where I'll be taking my other measurements. Starting with the bust point, I'll be marking the measurement on both sides of my fabric. So the shoulder to bust point for me is 11.5, shoulder to under bust is 15.5, shoulder to waist is 18 inches. And then from that waist point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch to add stitching allowance. Then I'm going to connect all these points with a straight line. To mark the neckline, the standard measurement is always 3 inches, but because I'm trying to get a boat shape for the neckline, I'll be using 4.5 inch. Also remember that this is where you're taking your measurements from. So on this shoulder line here, I'm going to mark 4.5 inch for the width and I'm going to come down by 1.5 inch for the length. I'll be connecting this together with a curve. On the shoulder line, I'll also be marking half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8.5. Now from that point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch, which is going to be for the shoulder slope. And I'll connect this with a straight line into the neckline just like this. From the shoulder slope, I'll be marking my chest line, and the chest line measurement is the bust divided by 6 plus 1.5. I have 8.25, so I'm going to mark that there. I'll be connecting this with a straight line like this. To get the armhole curve, I'm going to also mark my shoulder line divided by 2 on the chest line. Then connect this with a straight line to the shoulder slope. Now that I have that, I'll divide what I have from the shoulder slope to the chest line by 2. I'm going to place my tape there and just fold it into 2. I'll mark the midpoint, and from that point, I'm going to come in by 0.5 inch. I'll mark that there. On the chest line, I'm going to divide my bust by 4 and I'll mark what I have there. I'll be connecting what I have on the chest line to this midpoint here and back into the shoulder slope using a curve, and this is going to form our armhole curve. For the dart, I'll mark half of my nipple to nipple measurement from the bust point to the stitching allowance. Half of my nipple to nipple measurement is 4. I'll mark that on the bust point, on the bust point, and on the length. Now this princess that we are making is not the type that will be padding or will be needing cup for, so this is how we are going to go about it. I'll connect these points together with a straight line. From the bust point, I'll come down by 0.75 inch. On this down part here, I'm going to come out on both sides of the dart by 0.5 inch and I'll be connecting that back into this point here just like this. From the midpoint of my armhole here, I'm going to come down by 1.5 inch and I'm going to mark that there. Now I'm going to connect what I have here into my bust point using a curve. Just watch how I'm going to do this to know how to go about yours. For more shaping and a better fit, I'm going to go out on both sides of this line by 0.5 inch, just like this. And what I have on top here, I'm going to connect it back into the bust point like this. And I'll also be connecting what I have down here back into the bust point. Now what I have here is going to be the new line for my side, and the other one is going to be the new line for the center. I'll be extending this line I have on the side outward, and I'll be explaining to you why. Now remember that we came out by ½ inch on both sides here, and that is a total of 1 inch. So I'm going to mark 1 inch on this line here. Also, what I have in between my darts on the chest line is 1 inch. I'm going to also replace that. Now I'll connect these points together to get my new armhole for the side. I already marked quarter of my bust measurement on the chest line. I've replaced my dart, so I'll just be adding 1 inch stitching allowance there. Coming to the waistline, I'll divide my waist by 4. I have 8 inches. I'll replace what I have in between my darts there, which is 1 inch, and then I'll also add 1 inch stitching allowance. I'll go ahead and connect these 2 points together just like this. I'll be extending the zipper allowance into the waistline, and what I'll be doing now is to reduce any form of zipper bulge. From this point, I'm going to come in by ½ inch. Also on the waistline, I'll be marking ½ inch after the zipper allowance. Using my rule, I'll be connecting what I have here to the upper part. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim this out. Starting with the neckline, I'm going to add ½ inch stitching allowance. I'll also be adding ½ inch stitching allowance to the shoulder. When it comes to the armhole for the front and the back are not the same. So what I'm going to do first is to cut through this part here, which is the same. I'm going to stop at this point, and I'm going to trace out my chest line also on the back piece just like this. I'm going to connect this with a straight line. I'll open up the front piece like this. I'm going to mark quarter of my bust measurement, which is 10 on this chest line, and I'll be adding 1 inch for stitching allowance. Now I'm going to complete the armhole curve just like this, and I'll go ahead and cut it out. I'll also be cutting out the armhole for the front piece just like this. Now coming to the waistline, I'll also be tracing the waistline on the back piece, and I'm going to open this up. I'll be marking quarter of my waist measurement on the waistline. I'll add 1 inch for that and 1 inch stitching allowance. Then I'll connect this into the chest line. I'll go ahead and trim this out. Then I'll trim out the side of the front piece. Now to finish this off, I'm just going to remove the front piece so I can finish cutting out what I have here. After cutting it out, you can see what I have for the front piece. I'm going to go ahead and trim off the excess I have down here. For the back piece, I'll also be trimming out the excess I have down here. This ½ inch I marked here after the zipper allowance on the waistline, I'll also connect it upward like this. I'll cut out the excess I have here on my zipper. Now I'll be marking my dart because I forgot to notch it with the front piece, so I'll come in by 4 inches from the first zipper line I have there. I'm going to mark that, and I'll be notching that point. The next thing I'm going to do is to notch my zipper allowance up here and my zipper down here. To stitch this down, what I'm going to do is to open the center front like this, and I'm going to be placing the side front on both sides, making sure that I'm placing it well. I'll be placing the side front to the center front, right sides facing each other, and I'm going to go ahead and pin this down by the sides. I'll be taking this to my machine to show you guys how I'll be stitching this down. I'll be stitching it down using ½ inch stitching allowance, and as you can see here where the center front and the side front meet up here, they are the same length. Now this is me stitching this down on the machine. After doing that, you can see what I have here. I'll be doing the same thing for the other side. This is what I have. Now I felt like the neckline was too high. I decided to trim it down by ½ inch. I'm just going to fold that into two this way, and I'm going to trim it out by ½ inch. Now this is the new neckline I'm using. I'll be cutting out a facing for this neckline, and to do that I have my fabric here which I already cut out, and the length of this fabric is 6 inches. I already have this on fold here, so I'm just going to place this folded part here, and bringing in my center front, I'm going to place the center front on this folded part here. I'll go ahead and pin this down, and I'll be trimming it out just like you see me doing here. After doing that, I'm just going to unpin this and open that up. I'll be curving the edges a little with my scissor to attach this to the front piece. What I'm going to do is to get the midpoint and also get the midpoint of the neckline. I'm going to place the notches together like this, and I'll pin this down along the neckline. I'll be stitching this down using ½ inch stitching allowance. Also for the back piece, I'll be repeating the same thing. I already have my fabric here 6 inches long. I'm just going to put it there, and I'll place my back piece on it like this, and I'll pin it down. Then I'll also go ahead and trim it along the neckline, the shoulder, and the side of the armhole. I'll also be trimming out the downside to make a little curve. And then I'll place this right side to the back piece, and I'll pin it down on the neckline. And I'll be stitching this down using ½ inch stitching allowance. After doing that, this is what I have, and if you notice, I already stitched this down towards the lining. That's why you can see this second stitch here. This is what is going to help to keep the facing in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and notch it around the neckline. This is going to help me to have a neat neckline and not have any bulges. For the back piece, I also did the same thing. I stitched it down towards the facing, and I'm going to be notching around the neckline. I'll go ahead and iron this out. After ironing it out, you can see what I have here from the front piece. You can see how beautiful the neckline is laying. There's no bulge. And for the back piece, you can also see that I've done the same thing. What I'll be doing now is to join the back piece at the zipper. I'll place them right sides facing each other. And remember, down here I notched my zipper allowance, but at this top here, because of the facing, the notch is no longer visible. So what I'm going to do is just to mark 1.5 inch. Then I'll connect it to the notch I have down there, which is also 1.5 inch. Then I'll go to my machine and make a loose stitch along this line. After making that loose stitch there, I'm going to open this up, and I'll place my front piece right side to the back. What we'll be doing now is to join this at the shoulders, and if you already follow me on here, you know how we go about that to give a seamless finish. But because this side is farther from the camera, I'll be showing you guys with this other side. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'll just be using this facing to cover this other straight side. I'll pin it down, and then I'll be stitching it down using ½ inch stitching allowance. So this is how to go about having a seamless finish. The next thing we'll be doing now is to insert our sleeves, and for the sleeves I've already gone ahead to cut it out. If you don't know how to go about drafting of a basic sleeve, I have a full tutorial on my channel which is talking about that, and I'll be leaving a link in my description box so you can go ahead and check that out. I've notched my sleeve also at the midpoint, and I'll be attaching it to the bodice. I've gone ahead to attach it to the bodice, and you can see how beautiful this came out. We are done with the upper part of this dress, but we'll be doing one more thing at the back of the dress to help it to fit better. What I'm going to do is to come up from the center part by ½ inch. Now from this ½ inch, I'll be connecting it into the length of the sides, just like you see me doing here. After doing that, I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. Now note that this is just for the back of the dress, okay? This is going to help your dress to sit perfect at the back. To cut out the down part of this dress, this is quite straightforward. I already have my back piece, and the front piece I place it at the zipper allowance there. My zipper allowance is 1.5 inch. Now, to know how many inches to put your fabric on fold, for the front piece, divide your hip measurement by 4, add 1 inch for stitching allowance. Then for the back piece, you are going to divide your hip measurement by 4, add 1 inch for stitching allowance and 1.5 inch for the zipper allowance. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is to glue a starting line at the top of this place. This starting line is also going to be serving as the waistline, and from this point I'm going to be marking my other measurements. Now I'll be placing ½ inch at that starting line there. This ½ inch is going to serve for the stitching allowance to the upper part. Now, to mark my hip measurements, I'm going to mark my hip measurement is 8 inches, but I'll also be adding ½ inch for the stitching allowance, so I'm going to mark this at 8.5. I'll mark this on both sides. For the length of the skirt, also leaving the ½ inch mark there, I'm going to mark 19 inches, and then 1 inch is going to be for my hemming allowance. I'm going to connect this with a straight line. To mark my round body measurement, starting with the waistline, I'm going to mark quarter of my waist measurement, which is 8 inches. I'll add 1 inch for that and 1 inch for stitching allowance. On the hip line, I'll mark my hip measurement divided by 4, and I'll be adding 1 inch for stitching allowance. On the length, I'm going to mark quarter of my hip measurement, but I'll be removing 1.5 inch from that. Then I'll also mark my stitching allowance. Now I'll go ahead and connect all these points together. For the dart, I'm going to come in from the center front at the waistline here. I will mark half of my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 4 inches. And from that point, I'm going to come out by 0.5 inch on both sides. Then for the length of the dart, I'll be marking 4.5 inch, and I'll connect that back into the 0.5 inch I came out by on both sides. To reduce any form of bulge, I'm going to come down by 0.5 inch on the center front. I'll mark that there and connect it back into the waistline. Now on the back piece, I'll be doing a little zipper shaping, and how I'm going to do that is from this zipper point here, I'm going to come in by ½ inch, and then on this other side, I'll also be coming in by ½ inch. Now from this side, I'll connect it back into the hip line like this. And then this other side, I'll connect it back also into this part here. Then I'll connect it back into the length of the skirt. I'll go ahead and cut this out at the side. And then to cut out the waistline, I'll start with the waistline for the front, cutting it along that line here, but adding 0.5 inch on top for the stitching allowance. And then I'll also go ahead and trim out the waistline for the back piece. I'll be making a notch on my dart, and I'll also be making a notch on my zipper allowance. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim this out on the zipper allowance side. Now we are done with the down piece. Let's go ahead and connect this together with the upper part of the dress. To finish the dress, I'm going to bring this down part and the upper part of the front piece. Then I'm going to get the midpoint of the waistline here, and I'll also get the midpoint of the upper part. Now I'm going to place them right sides facing each other. I'll go ahead and pin this down, and I'll be stitching it down using ½ inch stitching allowance. I'll be doing the same thing to the back. I'm going to get the midpoint on both the waistline of the upper and the lower part of the dress, and then I'll place them together right sides facing each other like this and stitch it down. After doing that, you can see what I have here. I already placed them right sides facing each other, and then the next thing I'm going to be doing now is to insert my zipper. I'm just going to place my zipper there, and I'm going to determine how long I want my zipper to be. Then I'll close up the remaining part of the back piece. Also, I'll be taking out my body measurement on the sides, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch this down from the sleeve all the way to the length of the dress. After inserting the zipper, you can see what I have here. You can also see here that I've marked out my stitching allowance on the dress. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to cut out my ruffles. What I have here is 11 inches. If you want your ruffles to be fuller, all you need to do is to use more inch, maybe about 14 inches or thereabout. Now I'm going to also measure the length. The length of what I have here is about 120 inches. Now what I'm going to do is to fold this into two like this, right sides facing each other, and I'm going to be closing up this open side by about 0.25 inch. After stitching that down, I'm going to turn this to the right side. The next thing I'll be doing now is to come in from this point. I'll be marking 6 inches. I'll mark that and I'll continue to mark the 6 inches until I get to the length of this fabric. Now note that if you want your ruffle to be fuller also, you have to increase the number of inches you are marking, maybe to like 7 or 8 inches. The next thing I'm going to do now is to rule a straight line across each of these points. And then I'll be making a loose stitch on each of these lines I marked. After making the loose stitch, you can see what I have here. I'm just going to go ahead and gather this. I'll make sure to gather it on every other part that I made a loose stitch. After doing that, you can see what I have here. This is what it should look like, just like a rolled up sweet. Now I'm just going to count what I have here, and after counting that, I have about 19 of each of this. Now I'm going to bring in my dress and I'm going to measure what I have at the down part of the dress. After doing that, I'm going to divide what I have there by 19, which is what I counted. And you can see here what I have is about 2.4. Now, starting from this side of the dress, I'm going to be marking 2.4 inches all around the length of this dress. Now, I'll bring in my ruffle. Then starting from this edge, I'm just going to fold it in to give it a good finish. And then I'm going to place it on this part here. I'll pin that down. Then taking this first point, I'm going to put it on the 2.4 inch I have there. I'll pin that down. I'll take the next point and put it in the next 2.4 inch I have there. I'll also pin that down and I'll continue pinning it down until I get to the end. After doing that, you can see how beautiful this came out. I'll go ahead now and make a stitch on each of these points I pinned down. This is how I went about the ruffles that I added to this dress. We have come to the end of this tutorial. Thank you guys for watching. Do not forget to subscribe, to comment, and to turn on your post notification. I'll see you guys in my next one.